If there's one financial mistake almost everyone makes at some point, it's this. They spend their entire life chasing a bigger salary, but they never stop to ask whether that salary is actually building wealth. Because a salary can make you feel rich without ever making you free. You get a raise, so you upgrade the apartment. You get a bonus, so you finance a nicer car. You get a better job title, so suddenly your lifestyle expands to match the paycheck. And from the outside, it looks like progress, but behind the scenes, nothing really changed. You're still dependent on the next direct deposit. You're still one job loss, one emergency, or one bad year away from stress. That's why the real goal is not just to earn more money. The real goal is to use your income to buy assets. Because your salary is what you work for. Your assets are what work for you. And that difference changes everything. A lot of people think wealth is about income. It's not. Income helps, sure, but wealth is about ownership. It's about what you have that continues producing value even when you're not actively there trading time for it. Think about it this way. If you stop working today, your salary stops. That's it. Game over. But if you own assets, stocks, a business, rental real estate, digital products, cash flowing investments, those things can keep generating value long after the work is done. That's the shift nobody teaches early enough. Most people are trained to become better employees. Study hard, get a job, get promoted, ask for raises, and stay safe. But the people who quietly build real wealth learn how to take part of their earned income and convert it into things that appreciate, pay them, or grow over time. That's the formula. Earn, keep, invest, repeat. And the keep part matters more than most people realize. Because it doesn't matter if you make $60,000 a year or $600,000 a year if you spend almost all of it trying to look successful. One person earns less but buys assets every month. Another earns more but buys liabilities every month. 10 years later, one has freedom and the other has bills. That's why I always say the first sign of financial maturity is when you stop asking, what can I afford to buy? And start asking, will this help me build more? That one question can save you years. Before you buy something expensive, ask yourself, is this going to put money in my pocket or take money out of it? Is this helping me own more of the future, or is it just making me feel good for a weekend? And look, this doesn't mean you can't enjoy money. Of course you can, but there's a huge difference between rewarding yourself from a position of strength and sabotaging your future to impress people who are not paying your bills. Most people don't need more income first. They need a better system. Because if you can't manage a smaller income, a bigger one often just creates bigger mistakes. So here's where it starts. First, build a gap between what you earn and what you spend. That gap is everything. That's your investing fuel. That's your freedom margin. That's your ability to make moves later. If all your money disappears every month, you have no leverage, no options, no flexibility. So step one is simple. Spend less than you make consistently. Not for 1 month, not when you're motivated, consistently. Second, direct that gap into assets automatically. This is where a lot of people fail because they rely on leftovers. They say, I'll invest whatever I don't spend. But the truth is, if that's your strategy, there's usually nothing left. So flip it, invest first, spend what remains. Automate your transfers. Set up the investment before your lifestyle gets a chance to claim the money. If you wait until the end of the month, your emotions will always come up with a reason to delay. Third, start with the assets that are realistic for your current stage. You do not need to own a massive business or a portfolio of rental properties to begin. Start with what you can access. Broad market index funds, retirement accounts, high yield savings for your emergency reserve, a side business, a skill that can eventually become a product. A small but consistent ownership habit matters more than a flashy start. Because wealth is usually boring in the beginning. It looks like automatic contributions. It looks like saying no a few more times than other people. It looks like patience when everybody else wants speed. And that's where people get distracted. They want the appearance of wealth before the structure of wealth. They want the luxury watch before the investment account, the upgraded lifestyle before the emergency fund, the expensive car before they own anything that appreciates. And I get it, it's tempting. Social media makes it worse. Everyone looks rich online, but a lot of that is rented, financed, borrowed, or deeply fragile. Real wealth is often quieter. It's the person with low fixed expenses, consistent investing habits, and assets growing in the background. It's the person who doesn't need to prove anything because their numbers are doing the talking. That's the game you want to play. Here's another truth. Assets buy you more than money. They buy you time. And time is the real luxury. When your investments begin covering part of your life, you can take smarter risks. You can walk away from bad jobs. You can choose opportunities based on long-term upside instead of short-term survival. You can breathe differently when you know you're not completely dependent on one paycheck. That's financial confidence. Not pretending to be rich, not spending to look successful, not having one high-income month and calling it freedom. Confidence comes from knowing that your money is building something underneath you. So if you're watching this and you feel behind, here's the good news. You do not need to fix everything at once. You just need to start redirecting your money with intention. Take one category of waste and cut it. Increase your savings rate a little. Open the investment account if you haven't already. Put the process on autopilot. Build one asset, then another, then another. The goal is not overnight wealth. The goal is momentum. Because once you start owning assets, your financial life begins to change in a way a salary alone never could. You stop thinking month to month. You start thinking decade to decade. You stop asking how much you make and start asking how much you own. And in the long run, ownership wins. So yes, work hard, negotiate your salary, learn high-income skills, absolutely, but don't stop there, because the paycheck is only the tool. The real mission is what you turn it into. Build assets, not just a salary. That's how you stop working only for money and start making money work for you. Let me say something that might sound obvious, but almost nobody lives by it. Making good money is not the same as building wealth. And the reason that matters is because a lot of people spend years chasing higher income only to wake up one day realizing they built a lifestyle instead of a future. They got the salary, they got the title, they got the nicer place, the nicer car, the better dinners, the upgraded everything, but they didn't build assets. So even though they look successful, they still can't stop. That's the trap. A salary is temporary. It depends on your effort, your employer, your health, your time, and the economy. Assets are different. Assets can outlive your labor. Assets can grow while you sleep. Assets can create options you don't have when every dollar depends on showing up tomorrow morning. That's why if your goal is long-term financial freedom, the question is not just how much do I make? The better question is, how much of what I make am I converting into assets? Because that's what separates somebody who earns well from somebody who builds wealth. A lot of people misunderstand how wealth is created. They assume it comes from huge opportunities, lucky breaks, or some giant investing move at exactly the right time. But for most people, wealth is far more predictable than that. It comes from a repeated behavior, earning income, living below your means, and buying productive assets again and again and again. That sounds simple because it is. The hard part is that it requires discipline in a world designed to reward impulse. Everything around you is encouraging consumption, new trends, new subscriptions, new upgrades, new financing offers, new reasons to spend money you haven't even had time to keep yet. It's never been easier to look rich while staying financially stuck. And that's dangerous because lifestyle inflation is one of the biggest wealth killers out there. The second people start making more money, they often increase their expenses at the same speed. So their income grows, but their margin doesn't. Their paycheck gets bigger, but their freedom doesn't. If every raise immediately becomes more rent, more car payment, more shopping, more eating out, more monthly obligations, then your higher salary didn't buy you flexibility. It just made your treadmill more expensive. That's not progress. That's pressure with better branding. Real progress happens when your income rises faster than your lifestyle and the difference gets invested. That difference is where wealth begins. Let's make this practical. Imagine two people both get a raise. One person uses it to upgrade their visible life. The other uses it to buy more ownership, more index funds, more business investment, more savings, more cash flow, more future. 5 years later, these two lives look very different. The first person may seem more impressive in the short term, but the second person is building something invisible that compounds. They're creating stability. They're creating leverage. They're creating a financial base that will eventually make work optional. And that's the point. Assets are not exciting at first because they often don't give you immediate social validation. Nobody claps because you maxed out an investment account. Nobody notices your emergency fund. Nobody compliments your disciplined spending habits. But the people who win financially are usually willing to be underestimated in the present so they can be secure in the future. That's one of the most powerful financial traits you can develop. Delayed gratification is not deprivation, it's strategy. You are simply choosing to build a machine before you try to enjoy all the output. Now, when I say buy assets, I'm not saying you need to go out and overcomplicate everything. You do not need to become a financial expert overnight. You do not need 10 income streams by next month. You do not need some exotic investment nobody understands. Start with the basics. Build an emergency fund so life doesn't force you into debt. Eliminate toxic high-interest debt so it stops eating your future. Invest consistently into diversified assets. Learn one skill that increases your earning power. If possible, create one side income source that is not fully tied to your hours. That's enough to completely change your trajectory. And let's talk about side income for a second, because this is where a lot of people get it wrong. A side hustle is good, but a side hustle becomes powerful when it turns into an asset. If you freelance for extra money, that's useful. If you turn your knowledge into a course, a digital product, a content library, a business system, or a brand that can earn beyond your direct labor, that starts becoming an asset. The goal is not just more work. The goal is more ownership. You always want to ask, if I put time into this today, can it keep paying me later? If I invest in this now, can it increase in value over time? If I buy this, does it create cash flow, growth, or opportunity? That's how wealthy people think. Not perfectly, not always, but more often than everyone else. They understand that consumption feels good now, but assets feel good later, and later is where freedom lives. And yes, I know what some people are thinking. It's easy to say that when you already have money. But here's the truth. The habit matters before the amount does. If you don't build the behavior of buying assets when you have a little, you probably won't magically become disciplined when you have more. More income tends to magnify your habits. It doesn't automatically fix them. That's why somebody making an average income with great systems can outperform somebody making a high income with poor discipline. Because financial success is not only about what enters your account. It's about what stays, what grows, and what starts working independently of you. So if you want to change your life financially, stop measuring success only by salary. Salary is important, it's your starting fuel. But assets are the engine. Assets are what give you breathing room. Assets are what reduce dependence. Assets are what let you think long term. Assets are what create the possibility that one day your life is funded by what you own instead of only by what you do. That's the transition. From worker to owner, from consumer to investor, from looking successful to actually becoming secure. And it doesn't happen all at once. It happens one smart decision at a time, one automatic investment at a time, one expense avoided, one asset purchased, 1 year of consistency stacked on top of another. That's why the message is simple. Don't just build a salary, build a system. Build ownership, build assets. Because income can pay your bills, but assets can buy your freedom. There's a reason so many people feel like no amount of money is ever enough. It's not always because they earn too little. A lot of the time, it's because they only earn. They don't own enough. And if you only make money without building assets, you'll always be starting over. Every month becomes a reset. Every paycheck becomes a rescue. Every expense becomes personal because your entire financial life depends on what you do next. That's exhausting. And the worst part is society celebrates income way more than it celebrates ownership. People ask what you make, what your title is, what your job is, what kind of car you drive. Almost nobody asks how much you own, how much your investments generate, or how much of your life is supported by assets. But that's the part that actually matters. Because income is active. Assets can become passive. Income requires effort. Assets can scale beyond effort. Income pays for today. Assets can pay for tomorrow. So if your entire plan is, I'll just keep making more money, eventually you run into a problem. Your life becomes dependent on constant output. And there's a ceiling to that. There are only so many hours you can work. Only so much stress you can absorb. Only so long you can trade your time before you start asking a bigger question. What happens if I want to slow down? That's when assets become the answer. Assets are what protect you from the fragility of a one-income life. They give you layers. They give you resilience. They give you a second engine running in the background while most people are driving with only one. And building them usually starts earlier and smaller than people think. You do not need to wait until you feel rich to start. In fact, if you wait for that feeling, you might never begin. The smart move is to start while the amounts are still small because that's where identity gets built. Anyone can invest when they suddenly come into a windfall. But the people who truly change their future are the ones who decide, long before it's convenient, that part of everything they earn will be used to buy freedom. That's a powerful mindset shift. Instead of thinking, what can this money buy me today? You start thinking, what can this money become later? That's how builders think. And once you begin viewing money as a seed instead of a trophy, your decisions start changing. That expensive upgrade looks less appealing. Impulse purchases start feeling more expensive than their price tag. Short-term flexing starts losing to long-term control. Because you realize every dollar has a job. It can either support the image of success or it can help build the structure of success. And those are not the same thing. The image of success is easy to buy. The structure of success takes time. The image is the brand name lifestyle. The structure is the portfolio. The image is the visible upgrade. The structure is the invisible ownership behind it. The problem is that the image gets attention immediately while the structure pays off later. So most people sacrifice the thing that matters for the thing that gets noticed. That's why patience is such a huge financial advantage. If you can stay focused long enough to keep buying assets while other people keep buying appearances, the gap becomes enormous over time because assets compound. That's the magic, not just in numbers, but in optionality. One investment becomes a portfolio, one side project becomes a business, one property becomes multiple, one audience becomes a brand, one disciplined decade becomes a completely different life. And all of that starts with a decision that sounds almost too simple. I'm not just going to earn money, I'm going to keep part of it and make it work for me. Now, I want to be realistic here. This does not mean you should obsess over every penny or never enjoy your life. The point is not to become miserable in the name of optimization. The point is to become intentional. Spend on what you genuinely value. Cut what adds no lasting value. Avoid debt that steals your future. And consistently direct capital into assets that can grow. That's the rhythm. It's less about one dramatic move and more about repeated good decisions. People love dramatic stories, huge wins, massive flips, explosive success. But in personal finance, boring often works better. Automated investing is boring. Budgeting is boring. Reinvesting cash flow is boring. Living below your means is boring. But do you know what's exciting? Waking up years later with leverage, having choices, knowing you're not trapped. Being able to say no, being able to pivot, being able to survive disruption because your life is supported by more than one source. That kind of freedom is built quietly. And here's something else most people don't think about. Assets don't just grow your net worth, they improve your decision making. When you have reserves, investments, and cash flow, you stop making desperate choices. You don't jump at every bad opportunity. You don't tolerate as much nonsense. You don't stay in situations purely because you're financially cornered. Assets buy negotiating power. They give you emotional distance. They give you patience. They give you the ability to think clearly. That alone is worth pursuing. So if you're at the beginning, don't get discouraged by small numbers. Small numbers are where every big portfolio started. Every investor, every business owner, every financially independent person had a phase where their progress felt invisible. Keep going anyway, because invisibility is normal in the early years. The outside world often won't see what you're building until much later, but that doesn't make it less real. In fact, the best financial progress often happens long before it looks impressive. So focus less on appearing successful and more on becoming financially durable. Learn to live on less than you earn. Increase your income where you can. Buy assets consistently. Protect your downside. Be patient with the process. Let compounding do what impulse never can. And most importantly, stop making salary the final goal. A salary is useful. A salary can start the journey. A salary can give you momentum. But by itself, it is not freedom. Freedom comes when your money starts producing more money. Freedom comes when ownership replaces dependence. Freedom comes when your life becomes supported by assets, not just effort. So build assets, not just a salary. Because if you only earn money, you'll always need more. But if you own the right things long enough, eventually your money starts meeting you halfway.